Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Tonight, we plunge into a chilling collection of true stories, tales of survival against terrifying odds when all you have is your wits and your instincts. But first, a very happy birthday to our dedicated listener, name, or placeholder for future name insertion. I hope you've had a fantastic day. If you'd like a birthday shout-out, check out the link in the description for our Patreon. But for now, it's time to get comfortable, turn down the lights, and let the darkness take control. Imagine being 14, alone in the house, burdened by a responsibility far too heavy for your young shoulders. When the quiet of the night is shattered by a sound that changes your life forever. What would you do if your only escape depended on a puddle on the floor? This is the harrowing account of a young girl thrust into a nightmare where every second counted and a single misstep could mean the end. Her name was Sarah, and she was just 14, but she felt decades older. Her world revolved not around school dances or teenage crushes, but around the unpredictable tides of her mother's alcoholism. Sarah was the silent keeper of the house, the one who made sure the lights were off, who cleaned the bottles, who had to lie to her mom's boss when the hangovers became too debilitating to hide. Every night, a silent prayer that her mom would come home, and every morning, a familiar ache of disappointment when she didn't. This particular night was one of those familiar, hollow silences. It was 2:43 a.m., a time Sarah knew well, the witching hour when her house felt vast and empty. She was a light sleeper, acutely aware of every creak and groan of the old house, especially her mom's usually raucous return. Tonight, there was nothing, just the chilling scrape of wind against the window pane and the skeletal branches of the dead tree in the yard clawing at the glass. She knew her mother wasn't home. Again, the bitterness, a familiar companion, swirled in her stomach. Sarah, at 14, was resentful, but underneath, she just wanted her mom to get better, to be there. She pulled her thin blanket tighter, shivering not just from the cold, but from a profound loneliness. Then she heard it. Faint at first, a soft scraping, like someone fumbling with a lock. Not the front door, though. It was coming from the basement door, downstairs, below her. It quickly morphed into a rhythmic, insistent thud. Her stomach dropped. An intruder? No. Her mind scrambled for a more palatable explanation. It had to be her mom, too drunk to remember her keys, trying to sneak in through the rarely used basement entrance. Yes, that had to be it. She couldn't leave her mom out in the cold. With fear twisting in her gut like a cold knot, she told herself she was being paranoid. She had to check. Sliding out of bed as quietly as possible, her bare feet silent on the wooden floor, Sarah tiptoed towards the hall. Her breath hitched in her throat with every hesitant step. The noise was louder now, a continuous, sickening thud. The basement door, she saw with a jolt, was cracked open. She crept to the top of the stairs, the old wood groaning a protest beneath her slight weight. "Mom?" She whispered into the oppressive darkness below, but there was no response, just the thudding. She peered down, trying to make out a shape through the frosted glass of the door, and that's when panic truly seized her. The silhouette was all wrong. It wasn't her mother. It was unmistakably a man. The basement door had two locks, a standard one, easily pried, and a deadbolt at the top they never used, precisely because her mom was so prone to forgetting her keys and sneaking in that way. Sarah was frozen, every cell in her body screaming at her to run, to scream, to do anything. Then she heard it, a distinct click, and the door swung open, revealing a sliver of deeper darkness. From the shadows of the basement, a man's low chuckle echoed, sending shivers down her spine. Jackpot. Panic, raw and overwhelming, flooded her veins. A profound heat bloomed in her stomach, and her legs began to tremble uncontrollably. Her bladder, unable to withstand the sheer terror, betrayed her. Warmth spread down her thighs as she wet herself completely, the fear consuming her. And in that horrifying, mortifying moment, a strange twist of fate. The man wasn't looking at her. He was looking up, shouting to his cronies, urging them to open the main door. Perhaps they were too lazy to come down the basement route. In those few precious seconds, with the shame of her accident clinging to her legs, Sarah slowly, silently shuffled behind a stack of old boxes. She curled into the tightest ball imaginable, praying to whichever deity was listening that he wouldn't investigate, wouldn't look down, wouldn't see her. The man, oblivious, walked past the open basement door and ascended the stairs. Sarah heard an audible click as he unlocked the front door, and then the muffled voices of two other men entering the house. Words couldn't describe the sheer terror that enveloped her. She was young, a girl, alone in her house in the dead of night, and now 3 men, potentially armed, were inside. Could you imagine the fear? Asterisk. What were they after? Valuables? Or worse? Her only chance was the house phone, which hung on the wall directly outside the basement door. That meant climbing back up those groaning stairs. What if they heard her? What if they saw her? Logically, she tried to convince herself they wouldn't come down to the basement. They'd just look for valuables and leave. But logic was a flimsy shield against such overwhelming dread. She had to do something. So, she began to climb, inching her way up, praying they wouldn't hear. Every creak of the wood beneath her bare, wet feet felt deafening. Her wet pajama pants clung to her skin, making her shiver with every movement. When she finally reached the top, she saw it through the crack in the door they hadn't quite closed, the phone hanging on the wall. Gingerly, she stretched out her hand, reaching for the receiver. She was shaking so badly she nearly dropped it. Ducking behind the door, pulling the cord with her, she pressed the numbers. 911. The line clicked. 911. What's your emergency? A lifeline. She opened her mouth to speak, to whisper, to scream for help. But then, one of the men shouted, "Hey!" He had seen it. The phone cord, disappearing into the basement. Oh God, he's coming! Her blood turned to ice. She dropped the phone and bolted, tumbling down the basement stairs. She didn't think, she just ran. Behind her, she heard their heavy footsteps thundering after her. Someone's down there! She hit the cold basement floor and darted behind a pile of old boxes, pulling a dusty blanket over herself, curling into the tightest ball she could manage. Her body shook so violently, she feared they'd hear her breathing. She held her breath, willing herself invisible. Who was that down there? Don't move, little girl. We're not going to hurt you. The words were chilling, predatory. Then, she heard it. The sound of one of them slipping, followed by a loud, sickening thud. She waited, heart pounding, for what felt like an eternity. The basement was quiet. She peeked out. The man was on the ground. He had slipped in the puddle she had left on the floor. He had hit his head, hard, on the corner of the banister, and he wasn't moving. What decisions would you make in that moment? Asterisk. In that instant, Sarah didn't think. She saw her chance. She scrambled out from behind the boxes, darting out the basement door, taking the main stairs 2 at a time. Her legs burned, but she pushed through the pain, propelled by pure adrenaline and the primal instinct to survive. She didn't look back. She just kept running. She didn't stop until she reached a neighbor's house, hearing the distant wail of sirens approaching. The sound was growing louder, heading towards her house. And then, the terror and the relief overwhelmed her, and she collapsed to the ground, sobbing uncontrollably. It wasn't long before the police found her, calming her down enough to explain everything. The man in the basement was still unconscious. His friends had run when they heard the sirens, but they didn't get far. All three were caught within hours. And her mom? She never came home that night. When the police called her, she was still at the bar, too wasted to understand or care what had happened. CPS took Sarah away that night. She moved in with her dad shortly after, 2 states away. She hasn't seen her mom since, and she doesn't want to. The men who broke in are rotting in prison now, but no sentence could fix what happened to Sarah that night. She's still scared of going down into basements, and the nightmares, the echoes of that terrifying night, never quite leave her. She just wishes her mom had been there. Everything, she knew, would have been different. This harrowing tale of forced maturity and unimaginable vulnerability serves as a stark reminder of the hidden dangers that can lurk even within the supposed safety of our own homes. While our last story showed how danger can invade your personal space, our next tale reveals how quickly a seemingly harmless gesture from a stranger can turn into a terrifying trap, reminding us that evil often hides in plain sight. Have you ever been offered a free ride home by a stranger, thinking it's a blessing, only for your gut to scream that something is terribly wrong? Our next storyteller lived that nightmare. This happened to her about 6 years ago, when she was 27. She was working at a bustling bar, the kind of place that stayed open until the early hours, drawing in all sorts of characters. By the time she finally clocked out, it was usually close to 3 a.m. The city streets, once vibrant, were now quiet, almost eerily so. She lived close enough that walking home was her routine, a mere 10-minute stroll. Most nights, she didn't mind it. The silence after a chaotic shift was almost a comforting balm. But this particular night, something felt undeniably off. It wasn't a tangible threat, just a subtle tremor of unease beneath her skin. There were 2 routes she could take home. The first ran along the main strip, where bars and clubs still buzzed with residual life, even at 3 a.m. That street was always alive, a constant ebb and flow of drunk strangers, their voices echoing, slurred and obnoxious. She had walked that way before, but tonight she was utterly drained. The thought of weaving through crowds, deflecting unwanted attention, made her skin crawl. So she chose the other route, the quieter one, the darker one. Streetlights were sparse along this road, the buildings on either side mostly closed up, silent, lifeless. She told herself she'd be fine. She'd walked this way plenty of times before, but the heavy quiet pressed down on her with an unusual weight, and then she felt it, that unmistakable sensation of being watched. Every shadow seemed to stretch and shift, every distant sound magnified, turning benign rustles into potential footsteps. She was halfway home when she saw them, a group of 3 or 4 guys, stumbling towards her, loud and drunk, their slurred voices echoing down the empty street. She tried to step to the side, to give them a wide berth, but one of them deliberately moved to block her path. "Hey, sweetheart, where are you heading?" he called out, his voice slick, too familiar, as if they were old friends. She ignored them, kept walking, her pace quickening, but they circled around her like vultures, their laughter grating as they deliberately slowed her down. "Come on, don't be rude. We're just being friendly." Her pulse pounded, a frantic drumbeat in her ears. "Calm down. Don't show them your fear. Asterisk. I'm not interested," she said, her voice firm, a carefully constructed barrier. They lingered, their eyes raking over her, exchanging knowing glances. It felt like an eternity, an agonizing dance on the edge of danger, but finally, they let her pass. "Coward," one of them muttered as she walked away, but she didn't look back. She just kept walking, heart still hammering, the adrenaline a bitter taste in her mouth. She was almost home, her building just a few blocks away, when she heard it. The slow roll of tires pulling up beside her. She glanced over her shoulder. A taxi. It had pulled alongside her, matching her pace. The driver rolled down the window. "You're out late, love." His voice was calm, concerned, laced with a paternal kindness. He appeared to be an older man, perhaps in his late 52nd, with a gentle, reassuring face. "I saw you up back there, walking alone. Do you want a ride?" She stopped walking, hesitated. It was only a few blocks, and her apartment building felt so close, so safe. He saw the doubt on her face, the internal battle playing out. He added, gently, "I won't even charge you, just want to make sure you get home safe." How often do we override our intuition for convenience or politeness? Asterisk. That quiet voice in her gut, a primal instinct honed over years of navigating the night, screamed at her to keep walking, to say no, to trust the unease that had been building. But his face was kind. It was late. She was tired. And that offer of simple, human kindness in a desolate moment, felt like a lifeline. She ignored her gut. She got in. The cab smelled of stale cigarettes and a sickly sweet air freshener, a cloying scent that immediately felt wrong, suffocating. "Where to?" he asked casually, as if this was just another routine fare. She gave him her address, just a few minutes away, and they began to drive. She offered to pay him, but he shook his head, a dismissive wave of his hand. "Don't worry about it." Everything seemed fine at first. They were heading in the right direction, and she began to relax, even felt a bit silly for her earlier paranoia. And then he missed her turn. "Oh, that was my street," she said, a new tremor of unease snaking through her. "I know," he said quickly, glancing at her in the rearview mirror, his eyes briefly meeting hers before darting away. "Just finding a place to turn around." Her stomach dropped. A place to turn around? There wasn't anywhere to turn around here. She watched the familiar buildings of her neighborhood blur past, receding further and further behind them. They were heading deeper into an industrial area, a landscape of empty lots, abandoned buildings, and dark warehouses that hadn't seen life in years. What are you doing?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper, a desperate plea. He didn't answer. The silence stretched, thick and menacing. "This is the perfect place to turn around," he finally said, his voice flat, devoid of its previous kindness. "Turn around!" Her voice was sharper now, laced with a rising panic she could no longer hide. But his hand stayed steady on the wheel. He wasn't lost. He wasn't even looking for a place to turn. The car slowed, then finally halted. They were at a dead end. No lights, no witnesses, just her and him and the suffocating darkness. She couldn't breathe. Her mind raced, a frantic kaleidoscope of terror. Do I run? Do I fight? What if the doors are locked? Asterisk. The silence in the cab was deafening, pressing in on her, stealing the air from her lungs. She forced herself to speak, her voice trembling but resolute. "This is perfect. You can turn around here." For a long, agonizing moment, he didn't respond. Then, he slowly turned his head, his eyes meeting hers in the rearview mirror. And something in them changed. That kind facade dissolved, replaced by something cold, predatory, utterly chilling. She didn't know what he saw in her face. Perhaps the sheer, unadulterated terror. Perhaps the dawning realization that she was about to scream and fight with every fiber of her being, that she would not go quietly. But whatever it was, it stopped him. "You're right," he muttered, his voice barely audible. And just like that, he turned the car around. Her heart was pounding so loudly she could barely hear anything else. She kept her eyes locked on the road ahead, counting down the seconds until she was back in a familiar environment. When they got close to her place, she told him to stop a block away. "I'm fine," she said, her voice shaking slightly, betraying her desperate attempt at composure. She didn't want him to know exactly where she lived. She got out so fast she nearly tripped, her legs feeling like lead as she walked away. When she finally got inside her apartment, she locked every single door and window. She sank to the floor, her back pressed against the cold wood of the door, trying to calm her ragged breathing. She could have died that night. For a long time, she didn't tell anyone. She was too ashamed. "Why did I get in that car? Would you have gotten into that taxi?" Asterisk. Years later, when she walks alone at night, she still hears it, the distant hum of tires, slowly rolling behind her. It's usually just another car, but sometimes it reminds her of how lucky she is to still be around, and how terrifyingly close she was to vanishing off the face of the earth. If that taxi driver hadn't changed his mind at the last minute, her story is a chilling testament to the hidden dangers that lurk in plain sight, masquerading as kindness. From a seemingly helpful taxi driver to two men disguised as ordinary commuters, our next story will send shivers down your spine, revealing how public spaces can become the stage for unspeakable horrors, especially for the young and vulnerable. Imagine you're 15, on a quiet bus, and as passengers disappear, you realize the only two people left are talking about their conquests, and you're the last one on board. What would you do when the bus, your supposed ride home, suddenly transforms into a suffocating cage? This is a chilling true account from a woman who, despite the years that have passed, says the memory still sends a visceral chill down her spine. It happened to her when she was just 15, back in 2005. She had a part-time job at a seaside pleasure fair, dedicating her after-school hours and weekends to help her single mom, who was valiantly trying to make ends meet for two kids. She didn't resent the work. In fact, she appreciated the sense of independence and the occasional extra cash it brought. At that time, she was dating a boy from school whose family lived in a starkly different world, a wealthy part of town just outside the city, where houses boasted long, winding driveways and imposing iron gates. One particular night, after her shift, she agreed to go to his house. His mom had kindly offered to drive her home around 10:30 p.m. The only small hurdle? She had to navigate two bus routes to get there. The first bus would drop her off at the city's outskirts, and the second was supposed to deliver her within a convenient 15-minute walk of his grand home. She thought nothing of it. It was a routine she'd completed before. So, as her shift ended, she confidently hopped onto the second bus. Initially, the bus was reasonably full, a comforting sight that brought a sense of security in the late hour. But as the route meandered further and further away from the city's familiar lights and sounds, each stop saw more passengers disembarking, their presence melting away into the night. With every departure, a subtle, cold unease began to creep in. Her comfort level, she recalls, plummeted. She found herself subconsciously praying, hoping that at least one or two other people would stay on for the entirety of the ride back towards the city. But her silent pleas went unanswered. By the time the bus pulled into the final stop, the desolate terminus at the very end of the line, it was just her, the bus driver, and one solitary, seemingly innocuous man. She cast a quick glance at the remaining passenger, assuming, hoping, he was just another weary late-night rider. But her intuition, though yet unspoken, was already whispering, She was wrong. This wasn't just a random stranger. He was the driver's friend, a detail that would soon twist her stomach into knots. The bus shuddered to a halt at the terminus, and the engine died with a final, eerie sigh. An absolute, suffocating silence descended, heavy and impenetrable. There were no streetlights here, no other buses humming, just an overwhelming blanket of darkness pressing in from all sides. The air was thick and brutally cold, as it was deep winter in Scotland, where nightfall swallowed the day far too early. She checked her trusty pink Motorola Razr flip phone, 7:30 p.m. In an era devoid of the constant digital distraction of Facebook or Instagram, the silence felt even more unsettling, more profound. Then, with a disconcerting click, the interior lights of the bus flickered once, then extinguished, plunging her into almost complete, disorienting darkness. The driver, with a casualness that now felt chilling in retrospect, stepped out of his cab and announced, his voice echoing slightly in the sudden quiet, "Got to take a break. Be back in 15. She managed a barely audible, shaky, "Okay," her voice a mere whisper lost in the oppressive quiet. The driver and his friend stepped off the bus, leaving her utterly, terrifyingly alone. She could hear them just outside, their voices muffled by the bus's frame, yet distinct enough. They were talking, laughing. It wasn't the sound of friendly banter. It was coarse, predatory. And then she caught it. Fragments of their conversation that made her stomach drop, a cold, sickening plunge. They weren't just talking, they were bragging. She heard them, in crude detail, laughing about their latest conquests, vulnerable girls, often too drunk to remember anything. She distinctly overheard them recount a story about a girl who had passed out at a party and how one of them had dared the other to do unspeakable, horrifying things to her. And they were laughing about it, treating it like a shared, twisted joke. Her blood turned to pure ice. Here she was, a 15-year-old girl, alone in the middle of nowhere, trapped within the shell of a bus, with two men who clearly had no moral compass, no problem crossing the most horrifying lines. What would you do in that excruciating moment? Your mind would be racing, every primal instinct screaming at you to run, to escape. But where? There was absolutely nowhere to go. She was frozen in place, a terrified young girl, utterly helpless. The bus transforming from a mundane vehicle into a dark, metallic cage. Her guts screamed at her to be ready, to brace for the inevitable. She clutched her phone, her mom's number already committed to memory, her thumb hovering over the dial button, ready to call 911 the very second they dared to step back onto that bus. The minutes that followed crawled by, each second stretching into an eternity. It felt like hours. And then she heard the footsteps. They were coming back. When they re-entered the bus, she could feel their eyes on her, a palpable weight even through her tightly closed eyelids. She kept her head bowed, her gaze fixed on her lap, praying with every fiber of her being that they would just leave her alone. But they didn't. Their footsteps, slow and deliberately heavy, approached. "Hey, girlie." The driver's voice cut through the silence, dripping with a sickening, condescending familiarity. "What's your name?" Her throat went dry, constricted by terror. "Sarah," she lied, the word barely a whisper, a desperate attempt to create a barrier. They exchanged knowing smiles. "How old are you, Sarah?" They pressed, inching closer. 15. They shared a look that she says, even now, she hopes never to see again in her lifetime. "Where you heading, sweetheart?" The driver chimed in, leaning against one of the seats, his proximity making her skin crawl. Her mind was a whirlwind, screaming at her to remain calm, to not betray the sheer, paralyzing terror that gripped her. She forced her answers to be short, monosyllabic, giving them no extra information, no leverage. But their questions, relentless and invasive, grew worse. You got a boyfriend? What do you like to do for fun? Are you a virgin? Her skin crawled, 1,000 tiny needles prickling her flesh. She could feel the bile rising, a bitter taste in her mouth. They were growing bolder, their questions more explicit, their predatory intent no longer even thinly veiled. She was trapped, utterly and undeniably, and she knew it. Can you truly imagine the terror of being so young, so utterly helpless, completely at the mercy of two men whose intentions were so clearly, horrifyingly dark? How do you mask such paralyzing fear? How do you react when your intuition screams danger, but you have nowhere to go? Then, miraculously, a salvation. The crackle of the radio in the driver's cab pierced the suffocating tension. A voice, official and demanding, came through, calling for the driver to give an update on his route. His demeanor changed instantly, a jarring shift. His head snapped towards the radio, and he muttered something low and frustrated under his breath. He glanced at his friend, and with a forced, almost comical grin, said, "Looks like we got to cut this short, pal." He climbed back into the driver's seat, fired up the engine, and the bus roared to life. The familiar rumble, now a symphony of hope. The interior lights flickered on, banishing the suffocating darkness, and she could finally breathe again. His friend shot her one last unsettling, lingering smile before sauntering to the front of the bus. She remained slumped in her seat, trembling violently, too afraid to even move. They drove for about 10 minutes, a blur of motion back towards the familiar lights of the city. She kept her eyes fixed on the passing landmarks, counting down each stop, each street sign, until she could finally, mercifully, get the hell off that bus. When they were close to her designated stop, she shakily stood up and pressed the bell. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat of dread, because she knew the final terrifying hurdle. She would have to walk directly past both of them to reach the exit door. As the bus slowed, she waited until the absolute last possible second. Her muscles coiled, ready. Then, she bolted. She practically sprinted past them, her gaze fixed straight ahead, deliberately ignoring the sickening, triumphant grins plastered across their faces. "Bye, girlie," one of them called out, the words laced with a crude familiarity that chilled her to the bone. Their catcalls and jeers echoed through the night as the bus pulled away, a final, taunting symphony of her escape. She didn't stop running until she reached her boyfriend's house, a haven in the terrifying night. She stumbled through the door and collapsed into his arms, sobbing uncontrollably, the accumulated terror finally breaking free. His mom heard the commotion and came rushing out, her face etched with concern. When she managed to gasp out what had happened, his mom hugged her tight, holding her like she could somehow absorb the trauma, take the terror away. "Do you want to go home?" she asked gently, her voice full of compassion. Through her tears, she nodded numbly. His mom and boyfriend drove her home, where her own worried mom was waiting. His mom had wisely called ahead. Her mom, furious and protective, immediately wanted to report the two men to the police, but her daughter, still shaking from the ordeal, begged her not to. She was terrified that they'd find her, that stirring the pot would somehow make her a target. She was a scared, embarrassed 5-year-old who, more than anything, just wanted to forget the nightmare. But she never could. To this day, she remains haunted by the what-ifs, by how infinitesimally close she came to something far, far worse that night. She still sometimes hears their voices, those crude, predatory whispers, echoing in her mind when the nights get too quiet, a chilling phantom. What are your thoughts on situations like this? Would you have reported it or chosen silence out of fear, as she did? The psychological impact of such an experience is profound, a lasting scar that serves as a constant, unwelcome reminder of how vulnerable we can be, even in supposedly public spaces. It's a testament to the chilling truth that monsters often hide in plain sight. And sometimes, the most dangerous decision is choosing to ignore your gut feeling. From one terrifying encounter on public transport, we transition to two separate stories that expose how vulnerability can be exploited by cunning deceptions. One on a desolate road, the other right at your front door. Prepare to question what's truly safe. What if the most innocent-looking object, like a baby's car seat, was actually a sinister trap? Or what if a desperate cry for help at your door turned out to be a terrifying lure? In this segment, we explore two chilling scenarios where danger wears a deceptive disguise. Our first account pulls us onto a desolate road late at night, a place where exhaustion can make caution falter. Imagine the scene. It's 2 a.m. You're dead tired after a grueling 10-hour shift, just wanting to be home. The winding back roads are your quickest route, a dark, endless ribbon cutting through dense forest. Your headlights barely pierce the gloom. There are no street lights, no other cars, just you and the silent night. You're minutes away from crawling into bed when suddenly a car seat, not just any car seat, but an infant one, sits eerily in the middle of the road. Your heart skips a beat. You slam on the brakes, tires screeching, stopping just feet away. You stare, mind racing. What is it doing there? Is there a baby? Your blood runs cold. You've heard about this, a classic decoy used by traffickers, by carjackers. But this isn't a bustling city. This is the middle of nowhere. Every instinct screams at you to drive, to go around it, to flee. But what if there is a baby? What if someone's child has fallen out? The thought makes your stomach lurch. You crack the window, listening intently. Silence. Just the whisper of the wind rustling through the trees. No cries, no sounds at all. Go. Asterisk, you tell yourself, but your hand is already reaching for the door handle. Just a quick check. You rationalize, battling the rising dread. You step out into the biting night air. As you creep towards the seat, your pulse pounds in your ears, the back of your neck prickling with an unbearable sense of foreboding. You kneel beside it, hands trembling as you reach. There's a blanket, and as you lift the hooded part where a head would be, it's empty. And then, the snap, a branch breaking in the impossibly dark forest. Your head whips around. The woods are too deep, too thick. You can't see anything beyond the reach of your headlights. You start to run, but it's already too late. A hand clamps over your mouth from behind, strong and cold. You scream, but the sound is muffled, swallowed by the vast, oppressive night. You hear their cruel laughter, their jeering voices. "Oh, what we got here then, mate?" Then a sharp, searing sting, something striking the back of your head. Pain explodes in your skull, and the world blurs, spins into an abyss. You hit the ground hard, desperately struggling to crawl away, but then feel a vicious kick to your midsection, another blow to the head, and everything goes black. You wake up with dirt in your mouth, your head pounding, the pain so intense you think you'll vomit. Your body feels impossibly heavy, weighed down by lead. Your face is pressed against something rough. Branches, twigs, leaves. You're in a bush. And to add insult to injury, your hands prickle from stinging nettles. For a moment, nothing makes sense. Then it floods back. The car seat, the hands, the pain. Your eyes fly open. You try to sit up, but a wave of dizziness crashes over you. You blink, trying to focus. It's still dark, but the sky is beginning to lighten. You struggle to your feet, your legs shaking beneath you. You are so cold, your uniform torn, covered in dirt and scratches. Your head throbs with every agonizing step as you stumble out of the bush. Your car is gone. Panic seizes you. You are alone in the middle of nowhere. All you see are endless trees and an empty stretch of road. Your phone? Gone. Tears burn your eyes. Your body screams at you to lie down, to give up, but you can't. You gather your bearings, knowing you're on the route home, and start walking. Each step is agony. You don't know exactly where you're going, only that you must keep moving. Your vision blurs, your balance swings as you stagger forward, throat parched. Time stops making sense. Minutes? Hours? You don't know how long you walk before you see a faint glow in the distance. The village. You push yourself towards it, your body protesting, legs threatening to give out. You stumble onto the narrow street, barely keeping yourself upright. The village is quiet, but there's the small, flickering sign you pictured in your mind, A and E. You make it to the door, which slides open automatically. You step into the emergency center, your strength almost gone, and collapse onto a chair as someone comes running to you. When you wake, you're on a cot in a small room. A nurse hovering. Mild concussion, lots of bruises, but you'll be okay, she murmurs, her voice soothing but firm. The police arrive later. They found your car, abandoned on the outskirts of the village, stolen by a group of drunk teenagers who thought it would be funny to pull a stunt like that. They were all caught, but their sentence won't change what happened, won't ease the terror. Would your compassion have overridden your caution? It's a terrifying question to consider. Sometimes, evil doesn't come with a warning. It's just there, waiting in the dark. From a calculated roadside trap, we shift to a different kind of lure, one that exploits our deepest human instinct, the urge to help. Our next story transports us to a quiet house, a 13-year-old girl home alone in the dead of night. The silence is oppressive, the kind that makes the hairs on your arms stand on end. Her mom is on a night shift at the hospital, a common occurrence. Then, a loud, frantic knock. It echoes through the small house like a gunshot. She freezes, breath caught in her throat. Then it comes again, each knock more desperate than the last. Her heart hammers as she sits up, straining to listen. Is it her mom? Why wouldn't she just use her keys? And then, a voice, cutting through the silence like a blade. Help! My mom needs help. Please, help! It's a young voice, maybe her age. Her words barely making sense, intensifying with each desperate pound on the door. Please, I don't know what to do. Her blood turns to ice. She can't move, can't breathe. Her mind screams at her to get up, to go to the door, to do something. But she's rooted to the spot, paralyzed by fear. She knows better. She's heard the stories, read the horrors online, watched enough true crime to know that sometimes the person begging for help isn't the real threat. It's whoever is in the shadows, waiting. But what if it's real? Her body shakes, her hands trembling so badly she presses them against her legs to steady them. She stays in bed, barely daring to breathe, clinging to the hope that if she stays quiet, whoever is out there will go away. She squeezes her eyes shut, willing it all to be a bad dream. But the screams don't stop. Please, he's coming. And then she stops. The sudden silence is worse than her cries. The air grows heavy, and a chill crawls down her spine. She strains to hear, but everything is too quiet. She almost convinces herself that the girl has left, until she hears the footsteps. Slow, deliberate footsteps, moving around the side of the house. Her window is close to the front door, too close. She can hear everything, every crunch of gravel, every rustle of leaves underfoot. She hears something brush against the wall outside. And then, a man's voice. "Shut up," he hisses, low and menacing. She hears the girl whimper, and then the sickening sound of dragging. She wants to look, wants to peek out the window just to see what's happening. But she can't. She's too afraid. She stays there, body locked in place, barely able to think, her heart pounding so loud she's sure whoever is outside can hear it. Then come the footsteps again, heavier this time, moving away towards the street. For a long time she stays frozen in her bed, listening to the silence. Waiting. For what? She's not sure. But nothing happens. Hours pass. She doesn't move, doesn't call anyone. She just stays there, too scared to even breathe loudly. Eventually, she passes out from sheer terror and exhaustion. In the morning, her mom is already home. When she asks how her night was, the girl says nothing. What was she supposed to say? That she heard a girl get taken and did nothing? That she was too scared to even look out the window? She was ashamed. And if she's honest, she doesn't even want to know what she would have seen. She wouldn't have been able to handle it. What's harder, facing the threat, or living with the what-if of not acting? These two stories illustrate the insidious ways predators exploit our humanity, our compassion, or our perceived safety. Danger isn't always obvious. Sometimes, it wears a deceptive disguise. Now, our final harrowing account brings us into the seemingly safe world of school, revealing how a personal rejection can transform into a terrifying obsession, and how monsters sometimes hide in plain sight among us. What if the quiet kid who sat next to you in class, the one who seemed normal, turned out to be an obsessive stalker, willing to destroy your reputation and threaten your safety all because you said no? This final story is a stark reminder that sometimes the greatest threats aren't found in dark alleys, but in the most unexpected, seemingly innocent places. This happened to me when I was just 11, back in 6th grade, at a prep school in New York, Columbia Grammar. I'd been there since kindergarten, and by then I pretty much knew everyone in my grade. But that year, one new kid made me question everything. His name was Jack. At first, he seemed just like any other new student. A bit quiet, well-mannered, almost unassuming. He'd always managed to sit next to me in every class. At the same lunch table, always seemingly just there. I wasn't sure if he liked me or just wanted to be friends. I didn't worry much about it until he asked for my number. I gave it to him, thinking, what's the harm? It's just a phone number. At first, his texts were normal. School stuff, current events, just polite conversation. But the normalcy was a facade. One day, he asked me out. I wasn't entirely surprised. I'd sensed a shift in his demeanor, a growing intensity in his gaze. I politely declined. I tried to be gentle, to let him down easy. I said, "I'm sorry, Jack. I just don't like you like that." He ended the call immediately. I hoped I hadn't hurt his feelings too badly, but people take things differently, right? The next day at school, I tried to talk to him, to smooth things over, but he completely ignored me, walking away whenever I approached. It was clear I'd bruised his ego, but I wasn't going to give in. The rest of the day, he continued to avoid me. On the school bus home that afternoon, I saw him staring at me from outside, his face twisted with an anger I'd never seen before. It was then I decided I wouldn't try to talk to him again until he apologized. I just wanted to move on. But Jack wasn't interested in moving on. The very next morning, before classes even began, I was called to the headmaster's office. My heart pounded. What could I possibly have done? I walked in, confused and a little scared. The headmaster's face was grim. "We have been informed, and have proof, that you've been cyberbullying other students." My blood ran cold. Me? Cyberbullying? It felt like a punch to the gut. I defended myself immediately, assuring him I hadn't done anything of the sort. He then slid a printout across his desk. Fabricated texts, doctored screenshots, a complete fabrication of conversations between me and two classmates, Alex and Jason. My stomach clenched. "This is photoshopped," I stammered, my voice barely a whisper. He gave me 24 hours to prove it was fake, or I'd be suspended for 2 weeks. Imagine, your entire reputation on the line, your integrity questioned, because someone decided to twist reality. It was a terrifying glimpse into how easily lies can become truth if you don't fight back. I had to think fast. I took a picture of the paper. At lunchtime, I found Alex and Jason. They were sitting together, oblivious. "I need you both. Right now," I said, my voice urgent. They squinted, confused. "Jack has been spreading a rumor that I've been bullying you." Their faces were blank. They had no idea what I was talking about. I showed them the photoshopped picture on my phone. Their confusion turned to horror. Jason asked, "Why would anyone do something like that? What did you do to him?" I explained simply. He asked me out. I said no. That was it. We immediately went to the headmaster's office. Both Alex and Jason declared I hadn't cyberbullied them, and to prove it, they showed the actual conversations we'd had on their phones. There was nothing there. It was unequivocally clear. Later that night, I got an email from the assistant principal. Jack had been suspended for a week for spreading misinformation and cyberbullying. The relief was immense. A whole week without running into him. Maybe, just maybe, he'd reflect on his actions, and we could leave this behind us. The weekend came and went. I truly believed it was over, but it wasn't. I was walking home from dance class one evening, on my block, alone, lost in my phone. It was dark, the streetlights casting long shadows. Suddenly, a loud, sharp hey shattered the quiet. My head snapped up. It was Jack. My blood ran cold. How did he know where I lived? "Jack, how did you find me?" I asked. My voice barely a whisper. His face was twisted in rage, his eyes burning holes through me. He began to berate me, screaming about how I wouldn't go out with him, how he'd been planning this since they first met, how badly I had treated him. "How could you do this to me?" he shrieked. I took a step back, my heart pounding. His voice echoed down the empty street, a chilling sound. "I know everything about you. You think you can humiliate me and get away with it? You think this is over?" I was frozen in place, my body screaming to run, but I couldn't move. "After everything I did for you, you didn't even give me a chance." His voice cracked with rage, and then he raised his fists. That's when instinct kicked in. I ran. I bolted down the street, my lungs burning, pushing myself faster than I ever had before in my life. I could hear his footsteps pounding behind me, getting closer, but I didn't stop. I didn't look back. I was almost home, my apartment building looming into view. My doorman was still outside. As soon as I got close enough, I screamed for help. "Help!" Jack stopped dead in his tracks, his face pale with shock. Before the doorman could even react, Jack turned and ran, disappearing into the night. I stumbled into the lobby, gasping for air, my whole body shaking uncontrollably. The doorman asked who that was, but I could barely speak. I just mumbled, "Someone from my school. He's one-hev. He's been stalking me." He asked if he should call the police, but I was too afraid. I just wanted it to be over. That night, I told my parents everything. My mom emailed the headmaster immediately. On Monday morning, I was called into the office again. But this time, It was good news. Jack had been expelled. The relief was overwhelming, but even with Jack gone, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't safe. The rest of my middle school years passed without incident. I never heard from Jack again, but I still check over my shoulder when I'm walking home, especially at night. I still get knots in my stomach when I get a message from an unknown number. These experiences, no matter how long ago, leave an indelible mark. They teach us to trust that whisper in our gut, that prickle on the back of our neck, even when everything looks normal, because danger doesn't always wear a mask. It often hides in plain sight, in the classroom, in a polite offer, in the middle of a quiet road. How do you spot the red flags when they're so subtle? When someone's obsession is just a flicker in their eye, or their deception a polite smile? And what's the true cost of just wanting to forget such traumatic events? For me, the cost was years of checking over my shoulder, the lingering distrust, the fear of the unknown number. But the greater cost is the silence that allows these behaviors to fester. We need to talk about these things, to listen to each other, and to teach vigilance without fostering paranoia. It's about empowering ourselves and those we care about to recognize when something is truly wrong and to act on it. Because our intuition, our community, and our willingness to speak up are our strongest defenses. What are your safety tips? What lessons have you learned about trusting your instincts? Share them in the comments below. Stay safe, stay vigilant, and never forget that your voice matters.